Hello, my friends, and welcome. Settle in, find a comfortable spot, and let us journey together to a time long past, to a place where the air hangs heavy with secrets and a peculiar silence. Imagine, if you will, the town of Oakhaven, a place of quiet lanes and ancient oaks, where every house knew the rhythm of the day and night. Yet, in the heart of this tranquil settlement, stood a great house, its windows glowing with a soft, constant light that never faded. It was a beacon against the darkness, a sentinel that seemed to hum with an unceasing, gentle energy. Locals called it the house that never sleeps, and its mystery was a thread woven into the very fabric of the town's life. Now, close your eyes and listen, for a tale is about to unfold, a story of a lonely man and a house with a secret. If you enjoyed the story, please like and share. Now, try to unleash your imagination. The man's name was Elias, a cartographer by trade and a solitary soul by nature. He spent his days hunched over old maps, tracing the faded lines of forgotten roads and the borders of long-vanished kingdoms. His world was one of parchment and ink, of precise measurements and meticulously drawn symbols. Life in the bustling city had become a cacophony he could no longer bear, and his weary spirit yearned for a place of quiet contemplation. It was in an old, dusty archive that he found it, a map unlike any he had ever seen. It was not of a nation or a continent, but of a small, unknown town, Oakhaven, rendered with an almost loving detail. In the center, marked with a tiny, delicate star, was a house. The accompanying notes, written in a spidery, elegant script, spoke of a home that was a refuge for the weary, a beacon in the dark. The description resonated with something deep within Elias, a longing he had long suppressed. It felt less like a map and more like an invitation. He sold his small apartment, packed his few belongings, and with the map as his only guide, set off for Oakhaven. The journey was long, a slow unraveling of the modern world until he found himself on a winding, tree-lined road that felt as if it had been lifted from the very map he carried. As he entered the town, he noticed the subtle hush, the sense of a community that moved with a quiet purpose. The people he passed on the street offered him polite, if reserved, nods. But the whispers followed him. A baker, sweeping crumbs from his stoop, paused to watch him with a knowing look. A young woman, tending to a flower pot, quickly looked away as he approached. The name of the house was on every tongue, but always spoken in low, hushed tones, as if to speak it too loudly might disturb the very air. Elias paid no mind to the town's silent chatter. His focus was fixed on the map, on the star that marked his destination. When he finally saw it, the house was just as the map had described, a grand two-story structure of dark wood and pale stone, its windows spilling a soft, amber light onto the lawn, even though the sun was still high in the sky. A small brass plaque by the door simply read, Elias, his name. A strange twist of fate, or a welcome that had been waiting for him all along. He reached for the heavy iron knocker, its surface smooth and cool beneath his fingers, and for the first time in a long while felt the stirrings of a new kind of anticipation, not of anxiety, but of a gentle, comforting curiosity. But how could his name have been on the plaque of a house he had never seen before?
The heavy door swung inward with a soft, inviting groan, revealing an entrance hall that smelled of old paper, beeswax, and a faint, sweet scent of cinnamon. It was a scent that spoke of long-ago holidays and quiet evenings by a fire. Elias stepped across the threshold, his boots sinking into a thick, worn rug. He expected to find someone, a caretaker perhaps, or the person who had left his name on the plaque, but the house was empty. Or so it seemed. A grand staircase swept upward into a shadowed second floor, and corridors stretched out on either side, their doorways beckoning with the promise of hidden rooms. He stood for a moment, listening. There was no sound of a clock ticking, no creak of floorboards from an upper floor. Yet the air was not still. A low, continuous hum filled the space, a sound so subtle he might have mistaken it for the ringing in his own ears. It was the sound of a house that was alive, a living, breathing thing. He walked down a long hallway, his footsteps muffled by the same thick rug. The walls were lined with shelves upon shelves of books, their spines a kaleidoscope of faded colors. It was a library that belonged to a king, or perhaps a scholar who had dedicated a lifetime to the pursuit of knowledge. The silence was not empty. It was full of 1,000 unspoken stories, each book a tiny world waiting to be explored. Elias, a man who found comfort in the quiet company of books, felt a strange sense of homecoming. He ran his hand over the worn leather of a volume, feeling the history etched into its surface. He felt a profound sense of connection to the unknown person who had gathered this vast collection. A question, however, remained. Who had meticulously arranged all of this, and why was there no one here now to greet him? As the day wore on, he began to explore more deeply. The kitchen was a place of warm copper pots and well-used wooden tables, as if a great feast had just concluded. The faint scent of bread still lingered in the air, a phantom aroma of hospitality. He peered into a pantry stocked with jars of preserves and sacks of flour, all neatly labeled. The house seemed to possess a boundless energy, a state of perpetual readiness. He found a bedroom prepared for him, the bed freshly made with crisp, white sheets. A single oil lamp was placed on the nightstand, its wick already crimmed and ready to be lit. The meticulous care of it all was overwhelming, a silent invitation to rest and stay. He unpacked his belongings, placing his few books on a small shelf by the bed, and sat on the edge of the mattress listening again for the hum. It was there, a low vibration that seemed to come from the very floorboards, the very walls of the house. It was the sound of purpose, of something always in motion. As dusk fell and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the house's perpetual light grew more pronounced. The amber glow from the windows now seemed to pulsate with a quiet, steady rhythm, like a heart. Elias felt a profound sense of peace settle over him, the kind that only came from finding a place where one truly belonged. Yet a detail continued to nag at him, a small, persistent thought. The brass plaque with his name on it. He went back to the front door, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He ran his fingers over the engraved letters. They were not new. They were worn smooth in places, as if they had been there for a very long time. But he had never been to Oakhaven before, never known of this house's existence until a few weeks prior. How could a person's name be on a plaque for a home they had not yet arrived at? It was a question that hung in the quiet, scented air, a single loose thread in a tapestry of strange and wonderful events.
Elias awoke with the first light of dawn, the hum of the house a soft, continuous presence, like the distant sound of a honeybee hive. The silence of the night had not been a true silence, but rather a quiet, living thing. He dressed and went downstairs, drawn by a soft rattling sound from a back door. He found it led to a magnificent garden, a riot of color and scent that seemed to defy the season. Roses bloomed in the cool air, and the scent of jasmine mingled with the earthy smell of damp soil. The garden was a maze of winding paths and hidden benches, and in the center stood a small stone fountain where water trickled from the mouth of a sculpted boy. Elias felt the familiar stir of his cartographer's instincts. This was a place that demanded to be mapped, its every turn and hidden nook begging for a line on a page.
He reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around a small notebook and a pencil. He was so engrossed in his silent task that he did not at first notice the elderly woman tending to a row of snapdragons. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and simple, practical clothes, her hands calloused and stained with earth. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, her movements a part of the garden's own rhythm. She looked up, her face a web of fine lines that gathered around eyes of the clearest blue, and offered him a warm, gentle smile. "A beautiful morning, isn't it?" she said, her voice a soft rustle, like dry leaves skittering across a path. "The flowers are always happiest at this hour." Elias, accustomed to his solitude, felt a momentary awkwardness. "It is," he replied, his voice a little rusty from disuse. "The garden, it's quite remarkable." The woman nodded, her smile widening. "It has been many things to many people," she said, her gaze drifting over a patch of sunflowers that towered over them. "It's a place for healing, for quiet, and for those who have nowhere else to go." Elias felt a jolt of curiosity. You work here?" he asked. The woman chuckled, a low, melodious sound. "I suppose you could say that. My family has been tending to this place for generations, a long, long time." She continued to work as she spoke, her fingers expertly trimming a rosebush. She spoke of the house as if it were a person, with a history and a personality all its own. "It's a house that never sleeps," she said, echoing the words he had heard in town. "There is always something to do, always someone to help. The house, you see, it provides for all who live within its walls, and in turn we must provide for others." The words were cryptic, a riddle spoken in plain language. Elias felt a sudden rush of questions, a torrent of things he wanted to know. Who were these people? What was this work? But before he could ask, she stood, her hands resting on the small of her back. "The dew is lifting. The day's work has begun," she said, her tone signaling an end to their conversation. She turned to leave, her small figure disappearing behind a hedge of lavender, but not before she added one final mysterious detail. "You were sent here, young man. The house knew you were coming. It always knows." And just like that, she was gone, leaving Elias with a heart full of questions and a strange sense of wonder. Was that really her voice, or a memory of one from a distant time?
The encounter with the gardener left Elias with a profound sense of unease and curiosity. The house, he was beginning to understand, was not merely a structure of wood and stone. It was an entity with a purpose, a quiet, beating heart that had been at work for generations. He spent the rest of the day in the grand library, the silence of the room punctuated only by the soft rustle of turning pages. He felt a deep-seated need to understand the history of this place, to peel back the layers of its mystery. He pulled volumes from the shelves, their titles ranging from ancient history to botany, from poetry to engineering. The collection was a true reflection of a curious and multifaceted mind. He ran his fingers along the spines of the books, searching for something, anything that might provide a clue. It was in a small, dusty alcove at the back of the library that he found it, a set of leather-bound journals, their covers a deep crimson, and their pages filled with a spidery, elegant script that he recognized from the map he had followed. They were the journals of a man named Alistair Finch, the original builder and first resident of the house. Elias carefully opened the first volume, a faint scent of lavender and old paper wafting up to meet him. The first entry was a simple one, dated over 100 years ago, describing the initial purchase of the land and the dream of building a home that would not just shelter a family, but would be a place of constant giving. Finch wrote of his weariness with a world he saw as increasingly self-serving, and his desire to create a sanctuary, a place where kindness was not an act of charity, but a way of life. As Elias delved deeper into the journals, a remarkable picture began to form. Alistair Finch was a man of immense wealth and an even greater generosity, but he was also a man who valued discretion and privacy above all else. The journals detailed a complex and ingenious system he had devised, a hidden network of tunnels and secret passages built into the very walls of the house. Finch had designed the house to be a quiet hub for helping those in need in Oakhaven. He described how supplies of food, clothing, and medicine were discreetly delivered to the house through a series of underground passages and then distributed to the needy without fanfare or public recognition. The entries were not about grand gestures, but about the small, quiet acts of kindness that went unnoticed by the world at large. A basket of fresh bread left on a widow's doorstep, a warm coat for a child on a cold night, a doctor's visit paid for with an anonymous donation. Elias read on, his mind reeling. The continuous hum he had heard, the unceasing light from the windows, it was not a mystery of the supernatural, but of a quiet, relentless human industry. The house was a machine for good, a hidden engine of compassion. Finch's journals described the sounds he himself heard at night, the soft creak of a floorboard from a secret corridor, the low murmur of voices from a room he knew was empty, the quiet rustle of cloth as someone worked in the dark. These were not ghosts or spirits, but the house's inhabitants, the people Finch had gathered to help him in his mission. He had built a house that never slept because its work was never done. Elias felt a profound respect for this man, a kindred spirit who had also sought refuge in a quiet, purposeful life. But the journals ended abruptly, leaving Elias with a final, haunting question. Who had continued this work after Alistair Finch was gone?
Elias spent the next few days in a state of quiet fascination, the journals of Alistair Finch becoming his constant companions. He read them in the morning light filtering through the library windows and by the soft glow of the oil lamp in the evenings. Each entry was a revelation, a window into a world of secret generosity and profound purpose. He learned of Finch's meticulous record-keeping, a detailed ledger of every basket of food delivered, every doctor's visit paid for, every act of kindness extended. But these were not just numbers on a page. They were stories, brief, poignant narratives of people in need and the quiet, anonymous help that had found them. A young family who had lost their home to a fire, a widower too proud to ask for charity, a small boy who needed a new pair of shoes for school. Each was a recipient of a quiet act of grace. The deeper Elias delved, the more he understood the subtle rhythms of the house. The low hum he had first mistaken for a mechanical sound was in fact the collective sound of 100 small, purposeful actions. The rustle of paper was the counting of donations. The soft clink of glass was the bottling of preserves. The muted thud was the packing of a crate of fresh produce. The house was not merely a house. It was a living, breathing engine of compassion, its every part working in harmony for a single noble cause. He realized now why the house always felt so alive, so full of warmth and energy. It was because it was never truly empty. It was filled with the silent, unseen work of people dedicated to a shared mission. One evening, as a gentle rain began to fall against the window panes, Elias came across an entry that stopped him cold. Finch wrote of a sudden illness, a debilitating fever that had left him bedridden for weeks. Yet, during this time, the house's work had continued without interruption. Supplies were still delivered, aid was still distributed, the quiet hum of activity never ceased. Finch expressed a profound sense of gratitude and wonder, realizing that his creation had taken on a life of its own. He had built not just a house, but a community, a network of people so dedicated to the cause that it no longer relied on a single person to guide it. "They are the true heart of this place," Finch had written in a trembling hand. "My work has been to build the walls, but they are the ones who fill it with life." This was the strange, unexpected detail that truly captivated Elias, the profound humility of the house's founder, who saw his legacy not in the grandness of the structure, but in the unwavering commitment of the people who carried on his work. Elias closed the journal, his mind a whirlwind of emotion. The story of the house was a tapestry of quiet heroism and hidden compassion, a testament to the power of human kindness when it operates in the shadows, free from the desire for recognition. The mystery of the house's unceasing activity was not of magic or ghosts, but of a beautiful, well-oiled system of human charity. The true question now was not what happened in the house, but who were these silent benefactors, and were they still here, working in the darkness?
Elias set the final journal aside, the weight of its revelations settling over him like a comforting blanket. The silence of the house no longer felt empty. It was simply filled with a stillness that promised action, a quiet prelude to a symphony of good deeds. He now understood the source of the subtle sounds he had heard, the whispers that were not voices of the past, but the low, hushed tones of present inhabitants. He had to know more. Driven by this new purpose, he began a more deliberate exploration of the house, no longer a mere visitor, but a detective on a quest for truth. He walked the long corridors with a newfound attentiveness, his ears tuned to the slightest shift in the air, the softest creak of a floorboard. One night, unable to sleep, he sat in a large armchair in the library, a book open in his lap, though his eyes were fixed on the shadows. The town outside was quiet, the last streetlights extinguished. In the deep quiet of the late hour, he heard it. A soft, scuffing sound from the hallway, followed by a rhythmic thudding. It was not the sound of a ghost, but of a person carrying a heavy load. He held his breath, listening as the sound moved past the library door and faded into the back of the house. He waited for a full minute, his heart pounding with a mix of apprehension and excitement. Then he rose and followed the sound's path. It led him to the kitchen, where a sliver of light escaped from beneath the pantry door. He pushed it open, and the sight that greeted him was both mundane and extraordinary. A young man, no older than 20, was carefully stacking sacks of flour onto a small wooden cart. Another woman, her hair tied back in a simple scarf, was labeling jars of preserved peaches. Their movements were practiced and efficient, their faces set in a serene concentration. They did not notice him at first, so absorbed were they in their silent work. Elias stood in the doorway, a silent observer of a living tableau of kindness. The young man finally looked up, his eyes widening in surprise. I'm sorry," he stammered, his voice a low whisper. "We didn't know you were awake." Elias held up a hand. "Please, don't apologize. I simply couldn't sleep. The house, it has a rhythm I am not yet accustomed to." The woman smiled, a tired but kind expression on her face. "The house never sleeps, as they say in town. There is always work to be done." She gestured to the part filled with flour and the shelves of preserves. "This is for the families on the outskirts of town. A difficult harvest this year." Elias felt a profound sense of humility. He had been living in this house for days, a guest of a living, breathing charity, and he had been completely unaware of the constant, quiet work happening around him. He realized now that the hum he had heard was not just the sound of their work, but the very essence of their dedication. It was a tangible expression of a deep, abiding compassion. But how did they know where to go?
And how did the supplies come to them in the dead of night without anyone noticing? That question, like the others, was a quiet, insistent whisper in the back of his mind.
The secret of the house was no longer a mystery, but a tangible, living reality. Elias had seen with his own eyes the silent work of its inhabitants, a network of compassion that hummed beneath the surface of everyday life. He spent the next few days in a state of quiet observation, his senses heightened to the subtle signs of the house's purpose. He noticed the discreet departure of a small, unmarked van from a side gate in the early hours of the morning, its headlights off as it navigated the quiet, sleeping streets of Oakhaven. He saw the same young man he had met in the pantry, now wearing a baker's apron, walking with a brisk step toward the town's bakery, a large, empty basket swinging from his hand. Elias also observed the gentle, elderly woman from the garden as she carried a small watering can to a patch of wilting flowers near the town's small cemetery, her movements slow and deliberate. The more he watched, the more the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. He recalled the stories he had heard from the townspeople on his first day, the hushed whispers of unexplained good fortune, the baker who never seemed to run out of flour even during a lean season, the old woman who, despite her meager pension, always had a warm meal to share with her neighbors, the small girl whose family had no money for medicine, yet a package of the necessary vials appeared on their doorstep one morning, as if by magic. These were not random acts of fate. They were the direct result of the house's quiet, continuous work. Elias felt a profound sense of awe at the intricate, compassionate system that had been in place for so long, a silent benefactor woven into the very fabric of the town's folklore. He now understood why the townspeople spoke of the house that never sleeps, with a mixture of reverence and unease. They were not frightened of it. They were simply perplexed by its unwavering, unseen generosity. They saw the results, but they did not know the source. The mystery of the house was not its unceasing light or its perpetual sounds, but the incredible dedication of the people who worked within its walls, content to remain in the shadows, their only reward the knowledge of a kindness extended. Elias felt a deep, personal connection to this mission, a feeling he had not experienced since his days tracing the maps of lost cities. This was a different kind of lost city, a community of quiet heroes who had found a purpose beyond themselves. He sat on a bench in the garden one afternoon, the scent of lavender and roses thick in the air. The elderly gardener appeared from behind a hedge, carrying a small trowel. She sat beside him, her hands still stained with soil. "The garden is a good place to think," she said, her voice as soft as ever. "It holds many secrets." Elias looked at her, a question forming on his lips. The stories in town, of the house, of its endless work, they are all true, aren't they? She simply smiled, a knowing look in her blue eyes. "Some secrets," she said, "are meant to be shared. The house has chosen you, Elias. It has shown you its heart." A strange, comforting peace settled over him. He felt as if he had been searching for this place his entire life. But was it a coincidence that he, a man who had sought solitude, had found a home that thrived on quiet connection?
Elias sat on the bench, the warmth of the sun on his face and the profound calm of the garden in his heart. The elderly gardener, her name he now learned was Eleanor, looked at him with an expression of quiet understanding. "You've seen the house's heart now, haven't you?" she asked, her voice a soft murmur. "It is not made of wood and stone, but of purpose and people." Elias nodded slowly, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with a satisfying certainty. "The journals of Alistair Finch," he said. "They told me of the network, the mission, but they ended before the full story was revealed. Who carried on his work?" Eleanor's face softened into a look of deep reverence. "My family," she said, her voice filled with a quiet pride. "We have lived here for generations, since before the house was even built. My great-grandfather worked with Alistair Finch. They were not just partners in a project, but partners in a shared vision. She began to speak, her words flowing with the gentle rhythm of a well-loved story. She told him of her family's dedication, a legacy of quiet service passed down from one generation to the next. The house was not just their home, it was a sacred trust, a promise to the community that they would always be there, a quiet hand in the darkness. She spoke of the children who had grown up within its walls, learning the secret roots and the rhythms of the house's work. She spoke of the countless nights spent sorting and packing supplies, of the quiet pride in knowing that a family would have food on their table or a child a warm blanket to sleep with. It was a life lived in the shadows, not out of secrecy, but out of a deep-seated belief that true charity was a private matter between a giver and a recipient, a kindness that did not seek recognition. Elias listened, captivated by her words. He learned of the intricate logistics, the carefully mapped routes through the town, the coded messages left in public places to signal a need. The cartographer in him marveled at the complexity and precision of it all. It was a perfect system, honed over a century of dedication. He learned that the plaque with his name on it was a symbolic gesture, a sign that the house had been waiting for someone with a specific spirit, a person who understood the quiet value of purpose and of a life lived for others. His arrival had been an answer to a question the house had been asking for a very long time. "The house knew you were coming," Eleanor said again, her blue eyes twinkling with a gentle certainty. "It felt your spirit, your quiet longing for a place to belong. We have had many visitors, but only you found the journals. Only you followed the scent of the story. The house chose you to carry on the torch." A powerful emotion washed over Elias, a feeling of being seen and understood in a way he had never been before. He was not just a guest in this house, he was a potential heir to its legacy. He looked around the garden, no longer just a beautiful space, but a place of history and quiet sacrifice. The air hummed with a different meaning now, a melody of shared purpose. He realized that his long-held solitude was not a failing, but a preparation. He had been a solitary soul so that he could be ready for this moment, for this community of quiet benefactors. But was he truly ready to give up his solitary life for a shared purpose, for a home that never slept?
Elias walked back into the house, the quiet hum of its life now a welcoming song rather than a bewildering mystery. The solitude he had once cherished now felt hollow, an empty vessel waiting to be filled. The thought of a life of quiet, shared purpose was a revelation, a profound sense of coming home to a place he never knew he was looking for. He found Eleanor in the main hall, her small frame dwarfed by the grand staircase. He looked at her, then at the house, and he knew what he had to do. "I have a skill," he said, his voice clear and steady. "I am a cartographer. I can create new maps, more detailed ones, of the town. I can chart the needs, the routes, the changes in the community." Eleanor's face broke into a wide smile, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "We have always relied on old hand-drawn maps," she said. "A new perspective, a fresh eye, that is a gift we would be honored to receive." And so Elias began his new life. He spent his days in his small study, no longer tracing the lines of long-dead kingdoms, but of a living, breathing community. He met with the young man he had seen in the pantry, whose name was Thomas. Thomas was the logistics man, the one who planned the routes and organized the deliveries. Elias worked with him creating new, more efficient maps that accounted for everything from seasonal road closures to the sudden needs of new families. He also worked with the woman from the pantry, a kind and quiet woman named Sarah, who managed the house's vast stores of food and supplies. She showed him her meticulous ledgers, and Elias helped her to create a more streamlined system of inventory, a perfect blend of his precision and her practicality. The nights were filled with a different kind of work. Elias joined the silent teams, moving through the hidden corridors with a sense of wonder. He carried baskets of food to a family whose house had been damaged in a storm, leaving the supplies on their porch with a simple, unmarked card that read, "A friend sends warmth." He helped pack crates of books for the town's small, struggling school, each book a promise of a new world for a curious child. The work was tireless, but it was not a burden. It was a profound privilege. The hum of the house was no longer a mystery to him. It was a melody he was now a part of, a gentle rhythm of shared purpose and quiet kindness. Elias felt a sense of belonging he had never known before. He had come to Oakhaven seeking solitude, a place to be alone with his maps and his thoughts, and he had found a family, a community of quiet heroes who had welcomed him into their noble mission. He was not just a resident of the house. He was a guardian of its legacy. But what would become of this legacy when the current generation could no longer carry it on?
The days blurred into weeks, and weeks into months, each one filled with a quiet, purposeful rhythm that had become the new heartbeat of Elias's life. His meticulous maps now hung on the walls of the study, a testament to his dedication and a guide for the house's ongoing mission. He had found his place among the other quiet benefactors, a family of souls bound not by blood, but by a shared commitment to kindness. Thomas, the young man, now spoke to him with the easy familiarity of a trusted friend, and Sarah, the woman from the pantry, would often bring him a cup of tea in the evenings, her smile a silent thank you for his contributions. Elias had never felt a deeper sense of belonging. The solitude he had once sought had given way to a profound sense of connection, a feeling that his life finally had a true and noble purpose. Eleanor, the elderly gardener, became his mentor and his confidant. She would often sit with him in the garden, her gnarled hands resting in her lap, and speak of the house's history and its hopes for the future. She spoke of the importance of the legacy, the sacred trust of carrying on Alistair Finch's vision. One afternoon, as the setting sun cast long shadows across the lawn, she placed a gentle hand on his arm. "The house has chosen well, Elias," she said, her voice filled with a quiet satisfaction. "It knows you will be a good guardian." A wave of emotion washed over Elias, a sense of immense pride and a deep, abiding gratitude. He looked at Eleanor, at the peaceful lines on her face, and he understood. She was preparing to pass on the torch, to entrust him with the care of this living, breathing sanctuary. He was no longer just a resident, he was the future of the house that never sleeps. He embraced this new role with a full heart. He began to learn every detail of the house's inner workings, from the secret passages to the coded messages, from the inventory of the pantry to the history of every family they had helped. He became a student of compassion, a cartographer of kindness. The house, in turn, seemed to respond to his dedication. The quiet hum felt more pronounced, more alive, as if it were humming a song of contentment. He had come here, a weary and solitary soul, and he had found not just a home, but a legacy, a purpose that stretched beyond his own lifetime. The story of Elias and the house is not a story of magic or the supernatural. It is a story of human goodness, of a secret world of compassion and quiet dedication. It is a story that proves that even in the quietest corners of the world, great work can be done, and that a single act of kindness can echo through generations. As the final chapters of his own life began to unfold, Elias knew that he would not be alone. He would be surrounded by the quiet hum of a house that never slept, a house that was a beacon of hope for a town that would forever be a little kinder because of its unceasing, gentle work. The end of the story. Sweet dreams.